All right, looks like we're live. Welcome back to Conversations from the Underground. This is season 2, if you want to call it that. This is another year, but episode-wise, this would be episode 20. So as you guys should be familiar with, if you're not familiar with, this is just an opportunity for me and Brad to touch base weekly so we can cover whatever is going on, of course, with always a historical lens in mind. But more often than not, these conversations are not thought about, they're not planned. Really, we're just going to be off the cuff conversating for the next hour or so. So, what's up, man? You've been doing all right? Well, first off, um, let me remind everybody that we'll be dropping these conversations weekly for you guys to consume. We're looking at Monday at midnight. Does that sound about
Yep.
right? It's when it should go live for everybody to access. So don't forget that. But outside of that, this is, um, time for me to stop talking and see what's up. What's up, man?
Man, it's been wild. It seems like we tried a little bit of doing this in the summer, right? We got maybe one or two down before everything went crazy. Same hadn't really slowed down since then, it feels like, this
Uh,
semester began real quick and wasn't prepared, obviously, as both of us are moving into our office, which is about to be the lab. We don't know, we ain't there yet, but it's slowly chipping away, taking
mm,
two offices and merging them into one in a whole different location. Took us a while to get our furniture. Took us a while to get our computers, but I don't know. I feel good actually about what should be set here in the next month or so. I'm guessing, in terms of what this is going to be. I've spent the past year angrily upset with the transformation that's occurring into these Mr. Rogers neighborhoods that they got popping
mm,
up. Um, but the fact that we've been told that we get this space here for the rest of our career, and we're outside of that, man, it's exciting. I'm excited about reimagining that space as a place for students to come have more conversations. Eventually, take this podcast over there, expand, learn, collect knowledge in a more organized fashion. Right? I got so much knowledge around here, man. I've been moving things around, trying to get all these things situated, and moving all these bookshelves into my space, getting bookshelves over there, splitting them up, deciding which one's going to go here, which one's going to go there. And I'm finding so many documents and letters and notes.
mm,
It's amazing how much you accumulate over a lifespan, you know what I mean? And then how long you can kind of just forget about it. And it just seems like time goes so fast. And then you go back and look at this stuff, you're like, man, it's been a while.
mm. Yeah, you touch base with a lot of things that kick up memories of maybe where you were when you wrote it, how you were feeling when you wrote it. And I will say too, the new office is kind of reinvigorated a lot of energy from me about being more active now. And then looking back at a lot of the posters from programs or lecture series that you and I were running very early on when we started at TCC. Um, and now I feel like, well, maybe we can get back into things like that again. Maybe be more involved with the students to drum up ideas on how to approach things like that again. I felt like maybe I was going in, I think with the old office and with the way it seemed like TCC was going, I was feeling a bit not in a rut because I'm always there for the students, but just professionally, I was pulling back a bit. And now I think with the new office, like there's definitely a new energy to kind of start that back up. So I'm looking forward to that as well. As soon as we get a couple more things settled in the office,
Yeah, man,
maybe.
I agree. I'm with you on all of that, man. A little bit different perhaps with my previous office is that I spent so much time researching, right, and
Mm-hmm.
focusing on publications, which I kind of feel really liberated now for committing not to do any more of for a little while. Like I just turned in this manuscript that was due August 31st. I signed up to work on it in November of 2021. Um, so it was a long project. A lot of that time, it took me a while to get started. First off, but then this summer it pushed me really hard, and it was a lot. It was really stressful. And then, especially with this whole transition with the offices going on, but to kind of get that off my chest, get that off my belt, end it, and commit to channeling more energy into the lab and into the students' sort of exploration of history, I think has become more liberating and kind of, like you said, reignited, I think, what I think a lot of interested me at the beginning of this whole thing. When I first got this job, I just started to be his PhD student, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Um, I was just kind of like in the middle of it. And I was enjoying learning, which is different than writing. Like with this writing, it's just been kind of like I got to get this said and this done here, and you're so narrowly focused, man, that it just limits your understanding of history, I think, which worries me about a lot of these university professors who do this all the time. That's it. You just sit and you research this one topic, and if it's broad enough, yeah, that's good. But so they're so narrow that you're just constantly thinking about this, and I don't know. It's almost limiting in some respects when it comes to
Mm.
your understanding of history.
Yeah, limiting in the execution of the research by way of writing, or because I would imagine the research would be more eye-opening as opposed to limiting.
Yeah.
Granted,
No, what I mean is limiting in the sense of you finding connections in the broader history. So when I'm teaching history 1301 and I'm teaching about colonization, I'm not thinking about any of that stuff when I'm so narrowly focused on this research.
mhm,
Now when I'm teaching that, I'm reading a little bit of it beforehand. I'm getting the feel of I can prepare for class more instead of researching my paper. I mean, my essay or my chapter, like literally 5 minutes, 2 minutes before class starts. You know
mhm,
what I mean? Saving it, running down there to teach, coming back up. Now it's like I'm reading the chapter that I'm teaching on before I go in there and teach, and it's like,
right,
dang, I forgot about some of this stuff, or I forgot about these
yeah,
school connections, and it brings me back to a lot of these sources, like going through a lot of these records, man. I'm finding areas that I outlined in books or sentences or context that put this in your chapter 3 lecture, put this in your chapter 5, and I never did because I was so busy, you know, piling up these historical sources, but then keep moving forward and building more historical sources in the process instead of spending more time reflecting on what I've done. um, I feel like going back to that reflection opens your mind a lot more and gets you to see how important it is, to reflect and review on the things you've done in the past. You know what I mean? Like I got every notebook or every book or every thing that I ever purchased for any class that I ever took, starting
mhm,
at North Community College in 1999, 2000. Um, and going back and looking at some of that stuff, it's almost like I'm rereading it, or relearning it. Like
mhm,
it's shocking sometimes to even come to the realization that I wrote that down like that or said that. You know what I mean? And you can kind of see how much you've changed over time. But it helps you draw these connections, which I
mhm.
meant by when you're so narrowly focused on your research as a historian, you oftentimes may lose sight of those connections.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. Um, you know, a reflection is crazy important.
Mm.
Um, I think, when you're young, you're not reflecting as much.
Right.
Like you're in the mix of it all. So you're just more reacting than reflecting.
Mm.
Um, and I guess, when you slow down, I think when I was in undergrad and in grad school, everything was coming at me so quickly. I didn't have time to reflect per se.
Yeah.
I had to get this done. I had to get this paper done. I had to turn in these projects. I had to, and I'm not really reflecting on my work. I think that comes with the privilege of time. And as we get older, we are able to. I think the privilege in the sense that I'm talking about, it sounds like now that you no longer have to finish these obligations, you're going to find a lot more reflection time for yourself and put into perspective a lot of the work that you've actually been doing. And then other people are going to be reading your work too. So I think those are good things. Um, I think we were talking not too long ago, um, or not too long ago, or like earlier about King's disease.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And so we don't have to talk about it, let's say, this year. Well, no, we definitely need to talk about it this year, but we don't have to talk about it now. But I mean, we'll see where it goes with it, because whatever. But this is the 50th anniversary of hip hop.
Hmm.
So you're going to see, a bunch of tours here and there. And you and I, we went to one
Right.
and we saw how geriatric that could look as we've seen how far hip hop has come.
For real.
And
We had a lot of Dr. Shows
a
in
lot
the
of,
song.
a lot, a lot of unks, and aunties were at
Oh man.
we're at that show. But um, my favorite rapper or artist or whatever, MC, that's always debatable too. What is a rapper? What is an MC? And do those designations matter? And they do. Would be Nas, and Nas has that trilogy um, album, if you will, called King's Disease. So he's dropped 3 King's Disease albums within the past 2 to 3 years, on top of dropping this other one called Magic. But anyways, King's Disease. When you were talking, it reminded me of that album again, and it uh, not in the sense that you're falling into King's Disease, but I felt for myself that I was getting like lackadaisical, like um, I was like resting on my laurels of sorts. The whole notion of King's disease, that you develop gout just because you become gluttonous. Uh, you're not as hungry. You're not out there. You're just consuming and eating, and therefore you develop that disease of a king. Not that we were kings or anything, um, but I think for maybe the past 2 or 3 years or so, I've definitely been uh, resting on my laurels of sorts, and I
Yeah,
feel like
I think by that, I think he means, or more broadly, by King's disease, I think what we really mean is when you've reached the top of your craft, or uh, the height of your game, and whatever it is, right? I mean, whether it's whatever your profession is, when you have reached the peak, and you have hit this kind of, or maybe not a peak necessarily, but when you've reached a point where um, you're at the top, it's difficult to develop motivation to create new avenues to go further. because you don't have no reason to. You become complacent.
Yeah.
You become, I think, um, comfortable. And in the United States, particularly, where people can become a king oftentimes at their level of whatever it is that they do, and are having at their disposal all types of commodified, market oriented consumer society things just bombarding you and ready to gravitate your attention. It's even more difficult to maintain that hunger that is required maybe to have for you to progress and to become better. Um, you can't become better unless you practice. And if you stop practicing something for a long time, even after you've mastered it, you digress a little bit. I mean, you're never going to
Yeah.
digress entirely, but you're not on point as quick. You can't, speak up, bro, draw it to your head as quick as you could, or whatever. Repetition is the father of learning. You have to keep repeating things, I think, over and over again. And I don't know. Joel and I used to have conversations about this. He'd always tell me, like, "You're too crazy, man. Why are you're so doing all this production and fighting so hard when you could just be relaxing and all this stuff?" He said, "I got a problem or something. Like some people, they don't recognize maybe that they've done enough, so they have to just keep fighting to do more. Even when they're on the top, they don't see themselves as there. It's like, I still got a long way to go."
Yeah. Man, I definitely got complacent, and I don't think Joel is terribly off, because I think me and you had this conversation too, where, man, you're always on something, and I'm just trying to figure out how to relax more. And then and I'll talk to you, and you're like, "Oh, well, I got to do this." You're always got something to do, and you're probably just wired like that. Whereas I just want to chill. I want to be in King's disease, but I haven't done anything to warrant being in King's disease. But at TCC though, I've definitely gotten a bit complacent, and so I am excited about this move that we're making, because then I don't know, there's something about it that just re-energizes my attitude to get back at it.
The way in which that King's disease philosophy applies to you at TCC is that you have mastered what it is that you do. Like, you only have to teach 2 classes over and over again, 5 times a semester, a few times a semester. Every time you do it, you get better and better, and you can stay where you're at right now, and your classes are still going to be dope no matter what. You see what I mean? So it's like, why do I want to make them better?
Right.
Why do I want to improve them? The way to combat that is to tell yourself that it's not good. Like, no, I'm not there yet. I don't. This ain't good, or you be critical of yourself. A lot of people have a problem with that, particularly in hip hop, with this concept of the ego, which is a lot different, I think, that than maybe like reggae culture, or maybe some other aspects of music, or any sort of art that you could think of, and aspects of hip hop. But I mean, there is this sense of ego taking over, not self-reflecting enough on where you're at, and how critical of yourself you can be once you've reached the top. I think it's important to do. I think you maybe see that in fighting as well. Like, they say a lot of that shit about Conor McGregor, right? Getting all this.
And that's interesting point. Like the notion of ego in hip hop. Do we only see ego in hip hop?
No, but there
I
is
mean,
this
we can
bragging.
see it. We can see flares of it in other genres for sure,
Yeah.
but not across the board. It's almost accepted, understood, and expected that there's a bravado that comes with hip hop that you need. Because if you ain't got it, you don't have it. You know what I'm saying? There's nobody. I mean, you could walk in and be like this, humble, self-conscious rapper of some sorts, but rarely ever is that the
Yeah, it
case.
happens, but it's very recent too. I don't think it would be something that was part of the origins.
I would almost say the inverse takes place in other genres where more often than not it is this maybe more self-reflective or interpersonal expression as opposed and then with flares of ego, whereas this one it's all ego with flares of being humble or whatnot.
Yeah.
Maybe rock and roll.
Why?
I don't know. Well, I think, and then going back to what you were mentioning regarding fighting, I think it's because it's both of them are um, controlled, not controlled, not operated, but they're led by the youth. It's young. So the fighting is a young man's game or young person's game. Hip hop is a young person's, art form for the most part.
Yeah.
We may not like it because we're getting up there. And so a lot of our legends are or our heroes or the people we like are also getting up there. But at the end of the day, it's a young artist selling records.
That's why 3000 doesn't make music anymore, doesn't perform anymore, because he says hip hop is for the youth. Who am I, this old geezer out here? As cold as I was and probably am, he just don't feel like it's his place anymore.
Right.
Because there's an element of youth that is I think perspective orienting when it comes to hip hop, and maybe also has to do with this idea of the self. Like much of hip hop is about expressing an individual's self-madeness, if you will, your ability to observe, the self's ability to observe the environment and translate it into poignant words that resonate. The ability of the self to survive in very protracted environments because of your own grit, mentality, hustle.
But everything you're saying makes it sound like hip hop should be the musical genre of America's story. Like everything that America pretends to tell or teach in history, historically, or about itself historically, has been this notion of, picking yourself up by your bootstraps, being self-reliant, finding a way, making it happen.
Well,
A lot of grit and hustle.
yeah, maybe
See the
some,
word.
but it also has to be connected to uh, the marginalized aspects of society making something out of nothing. Like the hip hop has to come after the grind and the hustle and the hard work and the oppression has been taken, um, and is on the verge of being able to be powerful, transformed into something powerful. So like in the late 70s and the early 80s, these people had been struggling for centuries, and the backs of the generations before them had been weighted down so heavily that they were able to, at a time where they could turn this into something powerful, were able to use them all, right? And so it's not just this go-getter bootstrap, which country music could have elements of that, right? Multiple genres could have elements of that. So it has to
Okay.
be combined with some of this other element of downtroddenness, and the struggle through that, perhaps.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
So, yo, for sure. Yeah. There's definitely, yeah. So in other genres of music, for example, country, there's that pick yourself up by your own bootstraps. So
Yeah.
therefore, in hip hop, there has to be this like a shared struggle. Then more often than not, there's a struggle,
Sure.
or that it's from an oppressed. More often than not, it's from an oppressed state
Yeah.
or
So
position.
in fact, that's the institutionalized struggle, right? So
Hmm.
it's an institutionalized struggle that you learn to navigate through this culture, right? You know, 50, 187, 420, all this kind of culture of uh, navigating through the institutional system, how to survive when they're after you, right?
Hmm.
Um, and that's why I mean institutionalized. I think would also be important there.
Mm. And I guess then that gives room for also hip hop to include or come from individuals that may not be racially minorities, but as long as they have that shared experience with somebody
Maybe,
like an
yeah.
Eminem.
Like I've been working on this thought for a little while. Like because since the rise of hip hop, the field of psychology has drastically transformed. We've included all kinds of new diagnoses. Our society has increased anxieties and all this other stuff. Um, you see more interracial labeling and naming of oppression that attracts people to hip hop. So, like one of the things, and correct me if I'm wrong,
Mm.
but one of the things I also think that hip hop has to include is popularity, like vast popularity and consumption, and like so, like jazz was very popular. But I wonder to what extent, if we figured, if someone has ever done this, like what percentage of the U.S. population listened to jazz music in the 1920s, and what percentage of the U.S. population listens to hip hop in 1990s?
Oh, for sure. Well, it depends when you want to. So I tell my students, like, we could make an argument that maybe we're living in like our second Harlem Renaissance of sorts. Of course, it probably wouldn't be Harlem. You could make a reference to a different part of New York, and some have even suggested it being Atlanta for some reason. But just and considering the growth of the South, not that not that the population of African Americans haven't always been in the South, because they are, a great deal of them are. But there was a shift in culture um, from Harlem, maybe to the South, in line with where the Renaissance originally took place and where we are now. But I think it would be interesting to see those numbers.
Yeah, I would like
Um,
those numbers.
I mean, if it was just as popular, or if not, hip hop being more popular.
Yeah, I would say it's not even close. If I had to guess, I mean, the Harlem Renaissance significantly increased interracial connections, but that pales in comparison to the interracial connections that we have today. Uh, I mean that was before the civil rights movement, even, and the civil rights movement itself brought significant interracial connections.
Yeah,
Uh,
and then we would also have to measure um, from perspective. So, if we're looking at um, from where we were in the 1920s to the 1990s, we're looking at a 70-year span. Okay, well then run back from 1920, 70 years. We're looking at about 1850s, and we look about look at the amount of change that occurred over that time in regards to even
Oh, yeah.
entertaining interracial anything.
Yeah. And music wise, I mean, there wouldn't have been anything that anyone recognized as part of black music, even though it existed and was quite vibrant.
Mm-hmm.
It was very
Definitely
much
not shared.
right. It was very much underground, at least in the
Yeah, for
Atlantic.
real.
You know,
For real. And so, I mean, and granted, we could look at the numbers, and of course, I think the numbers would probably say hip hop has more of an influence by way of number, but you know, relatively speaking, there's probably from where they were in the African American community in 1850 to 1920. I imagine there'd be substantial uh, interracial connections considering that time frame.
yeah. And
Probably,
so, and so to bring this back to the point, I feel like that's a distinguishing factor of hip hop from, say, like jazz, when maybe you had musicians who dedicated their lives to the music and explaining and giving people the experience and reflecting on the experience. They didn't have any kind of purchasing power that you see today in hip hop.
no.
Right. And so like it's almost as if, I don't know, it reminds me of Pac as well, which is why I really wish he could have lived another 5 or 6 years. It would have been really interesting to see how his next 5 or 6 years into his mid-30s would have been. But it was like this concept of, we're here, we got this money, now it's time to use it, and really build something. But you have this element of hip hop that's connected to this concept of having uh, a lot of wealth and purchasing power, which also feeds into the self, right, and the ego. Uh, and so there are all these elements, I think, connected to it that make it this way, which is a flaw, but also a significant benefit. Character, it's one of those things that makes it what it is, makes it very profound oftentimes, and legendary and all these other things. But um, I don't know. It can be a problem as well.
Hmm. Yeah.
Which what got to do with he wanted to do. I think his story reflects that problem.
Who, Pox?
Yeah, I think Pac's story reflects his problem. I'm trying to
Oh,
describe
I
with
see, with the ego.
right.
Right.
Um, like he embraced it to the extreme to show people what it could do. Um, because he was a brilliant collective philosopher before he got into all this death row stuff. It's a really interesting dynamic to think about with him, and the message that he had to give to the world, which was sort of like hidden between these flashes of um, ego flaring up.
And again, him being incredibly young. I
Certainly.
mean, man, putting out the music he was putting out in the time frame he was putting it out, we're looking at what, between 21 and 25. Because I think he passes when he's 25 or something, right?
25, 27, between 25 and 27, yeah, somewhere around
Nah,
there.
he ain't 20. He ain't
Yeah.
27 because that sounds old. He's got to be at least 25, 26. Same thing with Big. I could be wrong, but to
27.
to look at his discography.
Born in 1971, June 16th, 1971. And I think he died in 97. No? I was in
So that,
high
so that put him
school
at 26.
around there, yeah.
Yeah, we don't do any fact checking on this. You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying? We're just shooting from the hip.
Birthday's right.
He was 99 years old.
Um,
No, but he was young, man, and then
no,
to think that he had the thoughts he had at that age. I mean, the ego is there. It's ripe for the taking. And he definitely, it was weird because he could exemplify a range of emotion. But definitely, I think in the last 2 years of his life, it was definitely on a lot of bravado and ego for sure.
Yeah, but he was in the process of getting out of that, and get back to what his mother was about, which was very important for his life growing up. I mean, and she actually did a lot of work after later on in his life, before she died of, I think, cancer or something. In her
Yeah, the last album he had was, the first track was called Bomb First. I don't know how far he was getting away from uh from that mentality that ultimately caught up with him.
Oh man, he had a lot of powerful songs, man. Real
For sure.
opening, even at that time, and then the stuff that came out after he died, even which he had already recorded, and then at an early age, his stuff was so, before he moved to California, and just shortly after moving to California, man, that was his best, and if he could have stayed on that path,
Right.
but Death Row, that's when a lot of the money started coming in, right? That started in the '90s. That, like, hip hop in the '70s and the '80s, um,
Yeah.
is a different thing. Even those before the hip hop game, like the Last Poets, and these cats who were real, like, keeping the message clear, um, or the older, the newer older cats like Gil Scott Heron, man. Those, if you listen to this guy, it's just very profound, and they're so influential. But then you get this other element connected to it when the money comes, um, that ultimately causes a lot of demise. I don't know. What do you think about that? I mean, it's interesting. A lot of people will argue that this was, like, driven on purpose to uh, cause the demise of Black culture. Um, but I tend to think it's more just a byproduct of capitalism.
What, that feud?
So the whole culture of shifting hip hop towards
Oh,
violent, destructive commodification thing, away from the Gil Scott Herons and the Last Poet philosophy, and towards, even though Tupac had that dimension still in his music, this other dimension that ended up getting him killed, the bravado, which is also connected to the ego and these other things that we've been talking about, which I think kind of fuels this excessive consumption, status struggle, which turns violent.
I mean, I'm not sure. So the question is, what do I think about that theory or concept that it was supported, promoted for to maintain the Black culture or the community in a particular place, or that it was
Yeah,
commodified for capitalistic reasons?
Yeah, usually reverse around Jewish conspiracy, maybe, or even a white conspiracy of controlling the message that gets sent out, of bitches and hoes and.
Right. It definitely changed, right? Because I mean, we saw it when we were at that show. They were going through the decades, right? And then so in the start, it was all like, "Eat your vegetables," da, 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 da. And it was all like, "Drink your water," and even the like rhyming pattern was very, um, you know,
Simple.
tickety tockety, Dr. Susie.
Right.
Um, no, I'm not. Hey, I'm not trying to be a hater or anything. I'm just saying it definitely was. primitive.
Cool.
He just,
It played
he,
basketball.
exactly. It's just, you listen to old rap and it's like, and you're just like, oh. But
This
anyways,
is not a test. I mean, come on, man.
right. But definitely the message was different. So
Mhm.
even the fact that song right there, the message, which I think is a Grandmaster
Yeah,
flashback. Again, don't
Master
fact
Flash.
check me, y'all. All right.
Absolutely.
So, anyways, and then Nas flips it
Yeah.
and he has the message on "It Was Written." But anyways, we're not going to get into that. But my point is this: is that man, when did it change? And then you're suggesting, or you're telling me about the theory or the concept that it changed for the sake of commodifying the genre
Yeah.
for
So
capitalistic reasons.
yeah, either it's this conspiracy that was fueled by, they say, Jewish or white supremacists, oftentimes investments to try to degrade the culture and help fuel criminalization, all these other things,
Mm,
as opposed to, which I would say is more likely, it's just a byproduct of capitalism. What you see connected to the shift here that you describe is what? Drastic consumption. Now, where does consumption come from? Where does popular and increase in demand come from? These are difficult things to pinpoint, like why people love something or become so attracted to something, some weird whatever little thing everybody wants. That, Marx refers to this as fetish, commodity fetishization, right? The fetishness that exists. Capitalism develops so much money, um, that people begin to conspicuously consume, because I can
mm,
throw money at this. Like, nobody had lawns, but now you got all these rich people in aristocratic Europe who say, "Look, I have a big patch of grass that I can spend all this money hiring all these people to fix, and it does nothing. That shows my status. I can throw all this money away on this thing, that's not unnecessary, because it shows my wealth and shows my status." And people start all wanting to have lawns, and with anything, I feel like, um, it's difficult to predict what the next fetishization is going to be,
for
in
sure.
capitalist system. But this seems to be a byproduct of that for me.
Mm. Yeah, I would probably align myself more with that. It just made economic sense to go in this direction with hip hop as opposed to it being some type of insidious, fiendish notion of controlling and keeping Black people down with a genre of music. I think that they were probably more inclined with, hey, um, we can corner this market if we appeal with this notion of hip hop. We saw that we introduced hip hop in a very like fun and maybe with a bit more of a conscious tip. But as you're getting at, in order to maybe capitalize on um, the Black economy, they went in the more gangster rap direction, which meant that it sold more in the Black community. Now, here's the thing: is like even if you sold everything to the Black community, you're still not making that much money
Yeah, I mean,
in the 80s,
all
or the 90s.
biggest
So
consumers are white suburbs.
right, so it's not going to be until you get to the late 90s that we see everything change in the hip hop landscape. When you begin to see Middle America listening to an Eminem album, then everything changes. So for you know,
It's interesting.
I can't, I don't know if I would ever say it was like this was there was a shift in the not context or concept was just the character. The content. There wasn't a shift in the content until we saw like when it comes to like the gangsterization of hip hop until like the early 90s. And that also came with on the cusp of there's still a cultural revolution. No, I'm sorry, a cultural not reformation either. Just maybe a conscious rebirth in the early 90s. So we see rap groups like Tribe Called Quest, De La Soul.
Yeah. Actually, I don't think
Not,
it ever ended, right? That it wasn't a rebirth. It was always there. It's just what got more attention and when, I feel.
fair enough. Well, okay, fair enough. But we see. So I think they were dueling in the 80s.
Yeah.
They were dueling in the 80s because you had Slick Rick, you had Big Daddy Kane, you had LL Cool J, and these guys weren't on no conscious tip. These guys were like, oh, I'm gonna knock you out. You know, that was all ego and bravado and hood stuff. But then
you
you also had
Flash during that time period. You also had those East Coast KRS Ones and these and the Lost Poets and Gil Scott Heron, who
but
were
around the 90s, that's gonna all die out.
right.
90, 92, 93, that's gone.
Well, I mean, but you still got the mindset. I mean, Pac's
Well, no,
Pac's albums
I'm
at that time period are really powerful too.
I'm just speaking commercially.
Oh,
Like,
okay.
yeah, they're these De La Soul records, even though we may see them as classic albums, they're not flying off the shelf.
Right, it's a commercial. Yeah,
And what we found out is what was more commercialized was something like NWA.
Yeah, and then the money starts rolling in, right?
Yes,
And
when we begin to.
it's kind of it occurred to me too that you also see something similar occur in the NBA. The cats in the 70s and 80s ain't making that kind of money. The lowest level pay, these fools are now working sometimes in entirely different industries. And then you get Allen Iverson's the first one who really kind of bridges hip hop with the NBA at a time. Massive amounts of wealth are now being. It's almost like the NBA and hip hop started generating massive wealth for these people together, roughly around the same time.
Right, but there will be a backlash.
Personalization.
There'll be a backlash with the NBA in that regard. Like, and you're right, Allen Iverson is that he personified the start of that era.
Right.
And then you'll see, and then everyone has a tattoo.
Right.
Right. The basketball players never had tattoos. And all of a sudden, here comes Iverson. They're on his neck. Yep. And people are like, what the heck is this? And they'd be the equivalent of seeing somebody with a tattoo on their face. But in America was like, who is this guy? And then we found out that, he was crazy talented and stuff. But
and people just serious contracts at that time. Now you're looking at people. I mean, the lowest player ever is set if they don't blow
for sure
money, right?
Yeah, for sure. But in the NBA, we saw a backlash to individuals like Iverson when they began enforcing like dress codes. Sure. With the music industry, we saw like we had congressional hearings trying to control.
Which in both cases, it only popularized it more.
Of course, right? Because now you have the man telling us what you can and cannot do with this emerging cultural phenomenon of sorts.
Right.
But I would still lean more towards. I don't want to even think that it's that calculated or insidious. I mean, I think this is what makes a lot of money. So let's go in this direction.
Yeah, and there's no doubt that that's happening. Once the money's rolling in, the investors are like, "Hey, you need to
Right.
throw more, this, throw more of that. And but in terms of like um, a big conspiracy, this is something I always encounter too in the history of cannabis, which is always a problem. Like these people make the argument that hemp, there's this conspiracy against hemp. It could save the world. It had all this money, and the
Right.
people with all the money used all their money to hide it and suppress it. It's like, well, it's capitalism. If they can make money, these foods would be throwing money at it and making money. Uh, they would abandon their cotton and synthetic fibers and join to this with all the money that they got. They wouldn't be sweeping it on the road trying to pretend like it didn't make more money than what they're doing now. Capitalists trying to make money. Uh,
Right.
you know what I mean? And there, that doesn't mean that when there's something that emerges and there's rumors about it and there's perceptions about it, people don't talk about it and make financial decisions based off those things. But when you put so much agency in the individuals who use their money to create something, particularly when it comes to art, it's just a stretch that removes, I think, a key element of the process from um, it lacks understanding of how art is created.
Mm.
You ain't got people out
Oh, for
there,
sure.
you know,
They could care less.
right?
And I mean, I would almost argue that on top of capitalism being the maybe catalyst or instigator um, for the genre going in any particular direction, if a byproduct of that happened to be the subjugation or internal strife within the community, they probably just saw that as a plus of sorts. If you want to, going back to the second conspiracy, where like, oh, hey, they're gonna this community is gonna harm each other over this music too. All right, well then let's two birds, one stone.
Right.
One could make that argument, but definitely more capitalistic
Yeah.
because we look at hip hop like right now. Um, Nicki Minaj, not anybody that I'm a fan of, but she is fairly talented in some areas. However, she made a comment. She's like, back when I was growing up, we listened to the radio because we were waiting to hear a talented artist. And now, when you turn on the radio, you're just hearing a popular artist,
Mm.
not necessarily a talented artist. And that's because hip hop itself has become more popular music than the music that you and I were growing up listening to, music that we probably wouldn't be listening to had we not grown up in the communities we had lived in. Back when I was listening to hip hop, I mean, it was primarily it was only Black people listened to it. That's just what it was. You know what I'm saying? Or if you grew up in like a certain part of town, you would listen to it. And for me, that was my case. Otherwise, I wouldn't have even heard it. But it
Yeah.
was, I couldn't be on the bus and not listen to it. You know what I'm saying? If
Yeah.
I was on the
By
bus listening to rock and roll, I might get my
by the end
Walkman
of
or
the
my
90s, that was a big shift, right? But by the
for
end of
sure.
the 90s, it's mostly white people listening to hip hop.
Would say that what time?
By the end of the 90s,
I
1990s.
wouldn't I wouldn't even give him that.
Yeah, it really is,
I'd
man.
say I'd
Like,
say mid
all the people
2000.
that are buying those NWA albums, man. There's a lot of that being formed. Now, percentage wise, of course not, but
I would
uh,
say like, and again, NWA was in regards to markability or maybe even their success, they could have quite possibly been an anomaly. Now, and what I mean by that is, yeah, we know their cultural influence, but did they? And yes, they made money, but could you replicate that with another group? And I don't think you could as easily as you can today. Like today, I mean, if we lost a Kodak Black, I'll go get another one. If we lost a Gunna, I'll go get another one. If we lost a young, young NBA, we'd go get another one. Or NBA young boy, would go get another. I mean, if we lost a Cardi B, I'd go get another one.
Yeah.
I don't know if you get another NWA. And we could make an argument for Wu-Tang. And here's another thing. I don't know if Wu-Tang sold a lot of records either. Culturally, they're phenomenal and they're mad influential, but I don't know their numbers. I don't.
Yeah, they have. But again, it was a lot of white people. It became very commodified in the late 90s. That doesn't mean that it wasn't still real and raw in many areas, but I think
for sure
that it drastically interracial increased attention that hip hop got set the direction that I think it would go in because of all the money that was to be made.
Who do you think is the highest selling rap group of all time?
Group?
Yeah. Who do you think is the highest selling hip hop group of all time?
I have no idea.
I don't know. I would have to say I want to believe it's Wu-Tang for the reason you just mentioned. Because now that you mentioned the interracial connection, and now that I think about it, like I remember, I know people from around the world that when they see the Wu symbol,
oh yeah,
like everybody gets down. I see the Wu symbol on minivans.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying? You know how they got the kids in the back? They got like 5 kids and a dog and then a Wu and then
the kids. They say, yeah. It's interesting.
I bet it was Wu-Tang.
Maybe.
Now, who do you think is the top selling rap artist of all time?
I don't know that either.
I bet it's Eminem. We're not fact checking or anything, but I bet it's Eminem.
I'm sure he's up there. I don't know that I put him at 1. I'd have to think about it a little bit more.
Yeah, I'd take a guess and say it's him, just because not because of his talent. We're not getting at that.
Yeah, just consumption.
Like it's purely what is America willing to consume? And remember, he was putting his stuff out when people were actually buying CDs back in the day.
Yeah, I'd take Tupac's up there too, and he wasn't even around that long.
I would only count his the albums he had. Remember after he passed, people was dropping like mixtapes every other week, and then we were trying to figure out, hey, is this Pac? No, this can't be Pac. No, I know it's Pac, because he had all those mixtapes that came out after his death, and they were in the streets. And so you pick them up for like $10 or whatever from a friend, and you burn you a copy.
Yeah, there were.
It's completely different today with streams and stuff like that. So it's difficult to gauge that, but the popularity of things coincides with the marketability and the rise of capitalism on that, for sure. But definitely I don't know who said this. The gangsterization of the genre has definitely changed a lot of that.
Yeah, and then whatever came after the gangsterization, I don't know what to really call it, but in hip hop, but
I would call it the popularization of hip hop, because it's now, dude. Remember that? Remember those CDs?
Like what I mean is, like, prior to the gangsterization of hip hop, there was this element we're describing. I would describe it as revolution. In a broader sense than gangster culture, and there's some significant aspects to gang culture and revolution, very
Absolutely.
much, in fact. And then there's something else that comes with the popular commodification, maybe.
And that would be just. But why do we consume things that are popular? Let me give you an example. Like Deion Sanders, right? Mm-hmm. He's crazy popular right now, all over the sports TV. He's all over TV. Brother's on 60 Minutes just an hour ago.
Right.
Okay. He's wearing these shades that are these basic shades you can go get at Walmart. Anyways, they're flying off the shelf. They've made $1.4 million over this weekend. And why? Because of the celebrity of the popularity of Dion. Now, you remember these? Say again?
Maybe some kind of mimicry. This drastic desire to mimic the popular person.
For sure. You remember these CDs called Now That's What I Call Music?
Yeah.
Now That's What I Call Music, Volume 5.
Yeah.
They still make those. You know that, right? They put on streaming platforms, they'll push those albums. But you had to go buy them back in the day. When you bought them in 99, guess who was on there? NSYNC, Britney Spears, Mariah Carey, Shania Twain, stuff like that. You go get that album today. Now That's What I Call Music, Volume 172, whatever number they're on. Every single artist on there, more often than not, I would say like 90% of the artists are hip hop artists. Yeah, they're rappers. And that's what I'm talking about. It wasn't like that before, because as you were getting at, it was more. If you listen to it, it's because you were around that group.
Well,
you were in that.
Had more meaning too. You weren't just a rapper. I mean, in that recent album that I was listening to today, where Nas calls himself a griot, right? Like, a rapper was something different back then. A rapper, and there's still some here today, but you were like a bard. You were a wise kind of speaker of wisdom,
a storyteller,
right? Yeah, but it's not just storyteller. It's also the wise story that has a moral of the story and the point, and to be woke before that term became co-opted by the right and transformed a little too much, but aware and conscious and understanding the situation. It's a certain kind of story that's woven with fact and lessons and things like this. Today it's a little different. I mean, there's like little this, little that. How many rappers are there who start with little and they say the same thing, and now AI just generates it can generate the rapper even. You know what I mean?
Good, man.
It's just so like filled with so many platitudes and just kind of I don't know, commercialized.
Now we could because we're of a particular era of hip hop, late 80s, early 90s. I was all 90s. I'm pretty sure there's some, like from our era, they're like, look at these kids with their hippity gangster, when we used to talk about growing our own okra and eating it. Look at them. And then the young kids are like, shut your old self up. I'd imagine today, a younger connoisseur of the music looking at us like, shut your old Nas listening. Shut your old ain't nobody listening to Jay-Z. Shut. I don't even know. I can't even name a Jay-Z song because they're all on what they're on. And that's the youth. Yeah. That's you. But hey, man, we wrap. It's that time.
Today, huh? Dang.
Quick. When we have no quotes, we're normal. And for everybody who doesn't know, from all last season, we end almost every episode with the quote. I don't even have them pulled up because normally I'd be thinking about something.
I got them pulled up, and
oh, good.
I stopped looking, but maybe I'll just use the one that's just sitting right here. Since we mentioned Tupac, I don't know how well we can make it fit, but he says, here's a message to the newborns waiting to breathe. If you believe, then you will achieve. Just look at me. Against all odds, though life is hard, we carry on. I like that quote. I mean, you got some references to the old generation talking to the new generation. You got this notion of if you believe the self, the ego, then you can achieve.
And the shared struggle is against all odds.
Struggle. The eyes are on me. Just look at me, right? And against all odds, life's hard, but we carry on and keep moving. And I don't know. We mentioned at some point how the expansion of psychology and the expansion of oppression and labeling pain more kind of may have made more people attracted to this idea of against all odds, and helped resonate with people more, like Eminem, who saw a lot in this kind of culture that this quote harks back to in hip hop. And maybe that helped carry it forward. I don't know. It's interesting. It's worth thinking about a lot more. Probably need another little thought, little episode on hip hop one day.
No, we do. It's a 50th anniversary. Why not?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we're thinking about it a lot, so it'll probably come up in a couple of episodes.
Yeah. Couple albums, couple songs, couple artists, just something. We'll figure it out. Cool, outside of that, man, it sounds like we're done.
All right, dog. I'll see you next week.
All right.
Peace.
All right, take it easy.